Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to Healing Moments, the interactive program with you in mind. Now, this evening, we want to welcome those of you who are on YouTube and those of you who are on Zoom. This evening, I have a double host with me, Sister Lorianne, and she is going to be here with me to host for you. Hi, Lorianne. I can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself.
There you go. Good evening, Kathy and everyone.
How are you this evening?
Oh, great, great. I have a fan in front of me, so the heat won't affect me for the next hour.
Oh, great. Well, this evening, like every month, we speak about one particular topic, and this month's topic is sexual health. Before we begin, this month's program will be graphic, along with our discussions. So we do recommend that persons 16 years and under do not join this program. Again, I'll repeat that. This evening's program will be graphic along with the discussion. So we do recommend that persons 16 years and under do not view this program. Well, as per usual this evening, we have three presenters on the program. We have the spiritual, mental, and physical health. After these some presentations, we'll be answering your questions to get your questions ready. But to start this evening's program and to give the opening prayer, we have Mr. Trevor Blenman with the spiritual part of this program.
Good evening, everybody. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for the mercies of the day, for your presence with us. We want to thank you for this opportunity to share with our brothers and sisters out there. We ask that the Holy Spirit would come and what we say would bring honor and glory to your name. We ask that those individuals who need healing would indeed find it as you reach out to them during these times. May everything that is said and done this evening be done to your name's honor and glory, for Christ's sake. Amen. This evening, I'm going to read to you from the book Modern Ways to Health, written by Clifford R. Anderson. The chapter I'm reading from is The Real Meaning of Marriage. And this is how it reads. In the beginning, man was instructed to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. He was to do this not by the blind, cruel instincts that govern so many of the lower animals, but by the exercise of self-control and enduring affection. It was not intended to be the sudden selfish passion of a moment, but rather a lovely spiritual experience in which both husband and wife would have an equal share. This is the highest expression of physical love that human beings can enjoy. When husband and wife take a dignified and sensible approach to marriage, they will appreciate and understand each other more completely. They will understand that reason and self-control are the things that set man far above the brute instincts of the lower creation. continues. But if this high level of thinking is lacking, the marital experience may come as a severe shock, especially to a highly nervous person. It may result in considerable unhappiness and perhaps even bring on serious nervous disorders. He continues, much depends on how adjustments go during the honeymoon, for this is the time when the foundations of a successful marriage are laid. Many unsuccessful marriages spring from ignorance and misinformation. Some young married people have been so misinformed that they develop a deep sense of guilt whenever they think of the other sex. This colors their whole attitude towards life and creates strong inhibitions, which may bring on an attitude of coldness and lack of understanding for the marital partner. Such people often assume hypocritical attitudes, with the result that even the marriage itself may be doomed. The only solution to such problems lies in gaining a new appreciation for the true facts of life. Although it is true that some married people live longer without a well-balanced attitude towards sex, there are rare exceptions. The great majority of marital failures seem to break down at this point. Doctors are continually reminded of this, for so many of the nervous illnesses seem to arise from this source. A thorough knowledge of the human anatomy and physiology will help in solving some of these problems that arise between husbands and wives. Each must realize that sex is one of the normal functions of life, just like breathing, eating, or sleeping. Within their proper sphere, none of these should cause embarrassment to anyone. But any of them, if carried to excess, may result in weakness and in health. That is the thought coming here from the book, Modern Ways to Health by medical man Anderson, Clifford R. Anderson. Go ahead, Jackie.
Thank you so much, Trevor, for that insight and that background. Now, last week, Sister Sherry spoke about part 2 on emotional connection. Now, this week, we have a special guest in, and Sister Lorianne is going to tell us about that special guest. But before she comes, let me remind you, the audience, that you have your turn to speak. And you get your questions ready. You can either type them in the chat. Hi, Cheryl. Hi, Lorianne. You can type them in the chat, or you can type them in the chat on YouTube. We will see them and we will ask those questions for you. So I will now hand over to Sister Lorianne, who will come and tell you about what we're going to discuss this week on mental health.
I don't know what's going on.
As Sister Lorianne is preparing to come, let us continue to discuss some of the things that...
What's going on?
You ready? Okay, she's still preparing to get ready for us. So remember, again, I want to remind you that we are asking for you, persons 16 years and under, not to watch this program, and you, the parents, because it is sexually explicit and very graphic in what we're discussing. We're asking that you not allow your children 16 years and under to view the program. Also, remember to get your questions ready. As soon as you hear this evening's program, you can type your questions in the chat, either on Zoom and or YouTube, and we will see and ask those questions for you. Now, while we're still getting ready for our special guest, we will give you a short bio on this guest. There you go. Hi, Lorianne. You're still, there you go. You still need to unmute.
All right.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. So we have a special guest with us, and he is in the person of Mr. Delison Charles. Welcome, Delison. So Delison is a mentor and behavioral therapist who is passionate about life and who expends his time and energy to help others discover and live out their purpose in it. Dellison is the founder of Daily Digest, an online holistic wellness community, which he dubs as a virtual safe space that allows people to connect with like minded individuals sharing similar struggles and be exposed to relevant, transformative content about real life issues in real time. He also works with clients via Delison Charles Holistic Life Coaching Services, in which he helps persons overcome obstacles that prevent them from achieving high performance in their lives and become the best version of themselves. Delison is a firm believer in God and the husband of one wife. He is an ordained deacon who has been serving God's people for the past decade and a dedicated evangelist who is committed to meeting people where they are in order to point them in the direction of where they need to go, Jesus. Welcome, Delson, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me on Healing Moments, guys. It is indeed a privilege to be here. When Sherry extended the invitation to me, I so happily received it. And, up to yesterday, she was asking me, so, what are you going to talk about? Because this topic, of course, is sexual health. And I told her, to be honest, I said, I don't know. But I said, I don't know, coming from the point of I like conversations like these to have a certain level of organics in them, because I believe that they are conversations that push the envelope. They are conversations that really challenge the taboos and stereotypes that we have, not just in our wider society, but existing even in, amongst believers and Christians and so on. And so it's an important discussion for us to have. Thank you so much, Lorian, for the bio reading. And in that bio, I would have shared with you guys that I work with clients. I am a behavioral therapist and a life coach, right? Especially a holistic life coach. And so with that, my job, I simplify it by saying that I work with people to interrupt their patterns. Because very often our thoughts lead to our emotions inform our behavior, and repeated behavior creates patterns, and repeated patterns create a lifestyle. And so my job generally is to interrupt patterns to help people have better lifestyles or turn around their behaviors so that they can have better lifestyles. Now, one of the elements of our lifestyles that tends to be underspoken of, especially amongst men, because I do a lot of work with men. I create safe spaces for men. One of the points of our lifestyle as men that we don't really like to talk about so much is our sexual health. But as a mental health professional, it's really interesting to see the link that is between that lies between your mental health and your sexual health or your sexual performance. And I was led to talk to you guys this evening about this whole concept of libido, especially libido with men. And when the question comes to me and I say, so what is an acceptable libido for men? Or what is a pretty regular libido for men? I smile and I return the answer. There's no normal libido for every man, right? Just as we are different, our sexual desire levels are also different. And so it's important for us to understand libido by understanding yourself. And so there are some persons, when you talk to them or when I enter into spaces with them and I ask them about their sexual activity, they may say, well, sir, my libido is low because I have sex 3 times a week. And then there are some persons you enter into conversations with them and they say, well, my libido is high because I have sex 3 times a week. And so you recognize that is very subjective when it comes to libido. But going beyond that, some persons, especially for those who are pretty concerned about their libido and about their sexual desire, because libido is a synonym for sexual desire. Some persons who are concerned about their level of sexual desire and their regularity of sexual activity, when we do some work together, we come to understand that their sexual desire or lack thereof is connected to their mental health, or in this case, some mental interference or emotional disturbance. And so I just want to underscore here for us this evening that there is an undeniable connection between our mental health, especially if we are experiencing poor emotional and mental health. There is a direct connection between that and our sexual performance as men or sexual desire. For those persons who are in relationship, which allows you to have exclusive and unlimited sexual activity, it becomes more of an issue when there's one partner, especially if it's the woman who is experiencing a higher sexual desire and the men are experiencing a lower desire. And for many persons, it actually comes off to be something that is strange and something that is it's an anomaly because society tells us that men tend to be hypersexual and men have a tendency to have a very, very high skyrocketing sex drive that women are the ones who actually have to say, hey, hold up a little bit, brother, give me a little chance. But interestingly, in our society, especially now with increased levels of anxiety, depression, stress, and other societal factors that impact men in particular, we have a reverse where we see a lot more women are becoming hypersexual and a lot more men are becoming hyposexual. And so there is a direct connection between anxiety, stress, depression, and even substance abuse and substance use as it comes to its impact or their impact on sexual health. So let's jump into anxiety first. So anxiety, I like to simplify it by saying that anxiety is an extreme concern for the future. You're very, very concerned about what's going to happen to the future. And so that can manifest in worrying about bills, worrying about making ends meet financially, worrying about performance at work, worrying about family life, worrying about anything. And so when you have an extreme concern for the future and you find your life being marked by plenty worry, it's very unlikely that you would be able to fully enjoy life in the present. And so, for those persons who do battle or struggle with anxiety, and some to the point of having a disorder, you see that there's a direct impact, and their sex life it suffers a direct blow because when they have a partner who is concerned about being active in this present moment, but their minds are in the future or their worry and their focus is in the future, it's very hard for them to be engaged in the sexual act. And so there are sometimes when you have, I'm talking about men in particular, there are sometimes when you have men who might be there physically, but they're not there emotionally or mentally. And what that does is that it leads the woman in particular to have some desires or some thoughts about being attractive enough or being desired enough or being desirable enough, and that causes a real issue in the relationship, especially if there is not a level of communication that allows the man and the woman to have this very open and free conversation. Um, Segueing right into anxiety, which is connected to segueing, sorry, into stress, which is connected to anxiety. Stress is what I like to call an extreme concern for the present. And so you are very concerned about what's happening to you in the present moment. You're concerned about impending projects. You're concerned about impending duties. Maybe you're having issue with time management. And so your cortisol levels are very high to the point where you are almost checked out emotionally. And so for persons in particular who experience high levels of stress, which impact you physically, one of those experiences is that all of your focus and energy it goes into trying to regulate your blood pressure. It goes into trying to regulate your headaches and all of these other um, byproducts or these other symptoms of stress. And it goes away from sexual desire. So we have persons now who experience erectile dysfunction as a result of their inability to successfully function, no pun intended, in the present when it comes to anxiety or to stress. And the last one is depression. And depression is one that I like to take my time with, just in terms of explaining to people that there is a confusion in our society because a lot of people trivialize depression. And there are some people who, if they feel extremely sad, they use the word very casual and they say, well, oh, I'm depressed, or this person's depressed. But I want to underscore first that being extremely sad is not necessarily being depressed, because you can be sad about things, but it doesn't mean that you are diagnosed or diagnosable for major depressive disorder. Equally, you can be anxious about something, you can be excited about something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are battling against anxiety, because anxiety and depression, these are real concerns, these are real mental disorders, psycho emotional disorders. And so when it comes to depression, it's very serious because I tell people the persons who are depressed, they have an extreme concern for the past. And very often it's impossible for them to enjoy life in the present because their minds, their focus, their energies are all on the past. And so one of the direct factors or the direct symptoms of a person who might be diagnosed for major depressive disorder is this lack of libido. Because in general, when you are depressed, you already have no desire even to walk, to get up, to interact, to socialize. So imagine if you barely have energy to socialize with your friends and your family, how much more energy does it require to not just arouse or to incite sexual activity, but to maintain and to ultimately perform. And so with all of these things, anxiety, stress, and depression in particular, as it affects men, I know these affect women too, but I'm speaking particularly from the position of men. As these things directly affect men, the reason why I wanted to underscore it again tonight is the fact that in our field, we have more of the statistics accounting for females because typically women have been the ones to come forward when they have any mental dysfunction or emotional disturbances. Women have been conditioned and it has become normalized amongst women for them to come forward and discuss the things that are not working for them, whether it be psychologically, whether it be emotionally, and otherwise. You hear women talking about if their lady parts are not working or they want to get checked out, they talk very openly and freely about going to their OBGYN, their gynecologist, and being checked out just to ensure that everything is okay. But very rarely do you have men talking about, wanting to go and to check their prostate or wanting to go and ensure, check their urologist, just ensure that everything is okay. Much less would men go to discuss any issues that they may be having mentally or emotionally, because these have typically been perceived as weakness. And so we have a lot of men in our society who are struggling under the burden of mental illnesses, struggling under the burden of emotional disturbances, and it's having a direct impact on their sexual lives and their sexual just activity. And they are not talking to anybody about it. So you have a lot of men who are struggling in silence, but when they are confronted or you know call into communication with their partners to have a deeper conversation regarding what is happening, few men want to open up to share the things that are bothering them mentally or emotionally. Because typically men have been conditioned to see these things as forms of weakness. Another thing is that we have some women who have been guilty of weaponizing men's emotional vulnerability. And so a lot of men are struggling under the burden of not feeling safe enough to open up and to talk about these things. And so what they do is that they either try to overcompensate in the sexual department in other areas, or they may just try to explain it away or make excuses and justifications as to why they may not be in the mood. And what this does is that it reinforces for the female, dependent on where her mindset is, it reinforces for the female this feeling of being rejected or not being desirable enough or not being attractive enough. And so I want to say to the ladies that it's not always your fault, right? It's not that you're not attractive enough. It's not that you're not desirable enough. But speaking on behalf of men, there are some of us who are, I want to say, struggling under the weight of mental illness and emotional disturbances, and we have not felt safe enough to open up just yet about it. So, what I would suggest is that you try to, we don't have enough time to go into it, but I would suggest psychotherapy. As a mental health professional, it would be remiss of me to not speak about psychotherapy or talk therapy as a form of intervention for that. Another practical way you can support your male partner, or as a male, another way that you can address your low libido or lack of sexual desire is actually get a test where you can check your testosterone levels at the doctor's office, and they will see what your testosterone levels is to find out if it is acceptable or not. And if indeed your testosterone levels are low, it could be directly related to your experiences with anxiety, stress, or depression. And another one is for those men who might be on supplementary medication, whether it be medication for antidepressants or it may be some medication for blood pressure. Some of those medications which are supposed to relax us and chill us out. Yes, they do relax us, and yes, they do even make us even keel, but they also directly impact our desire for sexual activity. And so these are some of the practical things that we can do to address it. But to my men who are listening tonight, I want to say that you are not alone. Um, as a man leading a stressful life and being married, there are times that my libido has been affected. And I've had to have these conversations with my wife, just reinforcing that it's not a matter of not being attractive enough or her not being desirable to me, but it's just a matter of that there were things at times that are happening with me. And so we have taken the approach or decided to take the approach where we have open communication, even about our sex life and our sexual health as a couple. And so I want to encourage all men to challenge yourself to enter into those spaces, and to our females, help our men to feel more safe in their relationships so that they are open to have these conversations with you and that they don't feel like they have to run away from these conversations with you. And I believe that once we open our communication more on sexual health, sexual activity, and the other contributing factors like mental illness or emotional disturbances, we would be able to make a deeper breakthrough in this conversation of sexual health and how it affects our society. So, guys, thank you so much for having me on Healing Moments. I did enjoy this opportunity to share with you tonight. I hope that it would have blessed somebody in some way, and I will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delson, for delving into this topic, especially focusing on all men. A lot of the times, women speak about sexuality, and because, as you said, our men are not as willing to speak about their sexuality, there's not much that is said about it. So I'm happy that there is someone who is available to speak to our men on the topic, someone who is also in the same gender, so they can feel comfortable to delve and confide. And
Yes.
Delison, just for the men who are listening and for the women who would like to tell their husbands, their significant
Hmm.
others, can you just share with us where they can find you on
No
social
problem.
media or wherever else?
Of course. So on Facebook and Instagram, I can be found Delhi Digest, Delli Digest on both platforms, and on the World Wide Web, you can find me at www.dellisoncharles.com, DELLISONCHARLES.com, or you can find me at dellisoncharles@gmail.com. So any one of those, send me a message. Feel free to send me a message and we can get into some deeper conversation. I'm here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much,
You're
Delson.
welcome.
I
No
mean, in
problem.
this age of technology, just type in Delson Charles.
Yeah,
Remember
it's
that face
there. Yeah,
and
this and the
get in
website has
contact with
me,
him.
so you see me.
Definitely.
All
All right,
right.
guys. So we're going to take a short break right now. So stay tuned.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Good evening once again. And those of you who I haven't welcomed before on Zoom and on YouTube, a very special welcome to you. And we have a first timer on YouTube. So I'm just going to say hello to Angela Gilbert. Thank you for joining us all the way from Grenada. Thank you so much. Remember, your chance is coming up for you to ask your questions and for them to be answered. Now, last week we heard sex is it on the brain, and we had a very interesting discussion. Lorianne is going to take us through, and she and Dr. Debris will speak about her topic this week.
Thank you very much, Kathy. For those of you, Delison, if you are still with us, can you just put your information in the chat? Some people are asking for some information from you. And at this time, Dr. Dupe and I are going to have a chat about sexual hormones. So Dr. Dupe, are you ready for us tonight?
Yes, Lori,
Welcome. Doesn't she look radiant,
I hope
guys?
that
Well
my
rested.
voice is just as awake as I am. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay,
Thank
so
you,
our
Lori.
first question is, how many sex hormones are there?
Oh, just a few. The main ones we know about estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. We think of women as producing estrogen and progesterone, and men as producing testosterone. But that is not exactly true or cut and dry as we would expect. Women also produce testosterone from their adrenal glands and from their ovaries. And men produce low levels of estrogen and progesterone as well. It's just that women predominantly produce estrogen and progesterone, and men produce much more testosterone than women do. In addition, there are sex hormones produced by the pituitary gland, and these are known as follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And they have functions in both men and women, so they can be found in men and women. Follicle stimulating, for those of you who know the anatomy of the ovary, you will immediately think of the follicles where the eggs ripen. And so follicle stimulating hormone is, as the word implies, stimulates the follicle and release of the egg. Luteinizing hormone also works in the development. Follicle stimulating hormone works in the development of the follicle. Luteinizing hormone, along with estrogen, work into releasing the egg from the follicle. And then, of course, in women, you have progesterone. Are you going to ask me what the functions of those hormones further down? So I don't want to go into functions if you're
Yes, definitely.
not ready. Okay, so estrogen, in women we have this menstrual cycle. So we have the follicle stimulating hormone that causes release of the egg, and we have estrogen that now causes thickening in the lining of the uterus, that is the endometrium. In case the egg gets fertilized, you're going to have enough nutrition or nutrients, good blood supply to nourish the egg. And if that doesn't happen, then of course you have the menstrual cycle and estrogen builds up again. If the woman does get pregnant, then progesterone is what protects the pregnancy from being lost, right? Maintains the endometrium so that the developing embryo can be nourished. And of course, we have in men, we have the testosterone, which is what drives his spermatogenesis, but also more than that, it plays a role in sexual desire.
What else does testosterone do in women?
It basically has the same role as men do, in that it helps to control sexual drive and sexual desires. However, because men have about 20 times as much testosterone as women do, we can now understand why men always seem to be on fire sexually, because they have this testosterone is driving them. If you are in touch with athletics, the Olympics, for example, you realize that testosterone not only drives sexual desire, but is also related to the physical development. So developing of the secondary sexual characteristics, like his deepening voice and his enlarging penis, but also developing muscles, muscle strength. And so that's why there is often controversy when some women, or maybe people who claim to be women, or maybe they're half women, produce such high levels of testosterone that they will outperform the women to such a great extent that they have to be banned from certain races that require endurance, for example, because they're definitely going to outdo the women. So they have to be banned from competing, or they have to be asked to bring their testosterone levels down. So they have to take estrogen supplements. Yeah, they may have to take estrogen supplements to kind of dampen the testosterone levels so that they do not perform like men.
Is there truth in the statement that testosterone increases your aggression?
Yes, it also does increase your aggression, and that's why men tend to be, in general, more aggressive than women. But that also has how do we call it? A role in the design of men and in their social roles, because men are supposed to be the protectors and the providers for the women. And so it follows that a man is going to be naturally more aggressive if he has to fight to protect his family. Sometimes he may even have to fight for a woman and to get a woman from another man. Yeah, so it does control aggression. And so one of the reasons men tend to have more rage as well. That's all testosterone driven.
Okay, interesting. What is the main difference between male and female sexual behavior?
Dallison did refer to it at some point when he talked about libido, and he mentioned that society sort of expects men always to want sex more than women do. So yes, because of the presence of testosterone, they have a stronger sex drive. Men think about sex more often. Men, there are men here, so I guess they can tell me if it's true. Men think of sex, a number of times a day. I guess on average, maybe once or twice, or maybe more. They might be surprised to hear me say once or twice. Women sometimes don't think of sex for a whole week, or sometimes a few days may pass and she may not think about sex because there are other things on her mind. And a man may wonder, well, what's more important that you could be thinking about,
Right.
especially when they want sex. So they tend to be driven by a higher desire for
Or-
sex.
But what about, is it true though that women become sexually aroused more quickly than men?
Is it true? Men become sexually aroused by what they see. Men are visually stimulated. So a nice rump that just walked by, or breasts, or seeing something in a movie or on a poster can have a male sexually aroused. it takes longer to arouse a woman sexually. And it doesn't mean that when she's ready to go, she isn't ready to go, but it means that it takes her a little longer, and she isn't as much stimulated by what she sees as by what she feels.
So can we safely say that once she has gotten to that point that she might be sexually aroused longer?
It is very possible. Men seem to be so used to arousal that they can easily switch on and off, more easily switch on and off than a woman can.
So here's the question that a lot of people debate about. Do women like sex as much as men do?
I'm sure they do, but there are women on the chat, so I'm sure they can just put in their yeses. I think women, there are, say, about maybe 20% of women who can be called, what shall we call them? I don't want to label them, but they can appear to have no interest in sex. And it's not that they don't have interest in sex. It's just that things have happened before that have made them lose desire in sex. And it's harder to switch back on that sexual desire, because for a woman, it's so much more than just physical. And I'm not saying that it's not psychological for men, but a woman has to be in the mood, and the mood depends on so many things.
So many different
I
things.
mean, yes, can depend on her menstrual cycle, it can depend on the presence of children, it can depend on
what is going
illness,
on at their home at the time.
yeah,
and
that kind of thing. Whereas men can easily get in the mood, and sometimes they don't even have to be in the mood. They can just need the release, but women have to be in the mood, and it takes a little bit of doing sometimes to get her in the mood if she's not
there.
right.
Now,
a woman likes affection. One of the things that can turn a woman on is affection. And affection can be shown in so many ways. A man may think that it's just touching his wife that shows affection, but sometimes the men touch only sexually, and a woman likes to be touched in a non-sexual way too. She likes to be hugged and appreciates it in a non-sexual way, and that makes her feel good as well. And a man can probably sometimes not understand why the touch shouldn't always translate into something sexual. But a woman does not like to be thought of as a vagina. They want to be thought of as a whole, right, as a whole person, because they bring in so much more to a relationship than just sex. So sometimes they like to be treated affectionately, a little gift, a little note, a little peck on the cheek, something that makes them know that a hug, that I know you're there and I appreciate you, and it's not just about getting into bed with you. I know a man who used to beat his wife, and then at nighttime, of course, he reaches out to touch her, to try to have sex. And well, that was a little scandalous, and she screamed and carried on and would not allow him to have sex. And he said he didn't see what
the problem
disagreements during the day have to do with sexual activity in the night. So
during the night,
totally different.
He did not see the connection at all.
He didn't see the connection at all.
I would like our women and our men in the chat and in YouTube and on Zoom to type in what they value most in a sexual relationship. Because Dr. Dupuy has already mentioned that women like to be touched on a non-sexual way. So some of the things that you all value most in a sexual relationship. So Doc, what are some of the main things that you think are what a woman would value most in a sexual relationship while we wait for our viewers to chime in.
Okay, so a woman wants you, again, as I said, a woman wants tenderness, affection. She doesn't just want what one of my friends called boom, 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 you know, wham, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
That kind of thing. Yes, she wants her body
Question,
appreciated just as
right.
much as a man wants his body to appreciate it, to be appreciated. I read somewhere that no, it's gone from my mind. But yeah, I was reading here that men want to be wanted. You know, I think that we were kind of cultured to believe that the man should always come to us, should ask us, should make the first move.
Right.
But men actually do appreciate when women come to not approach you sexually on the street, because you know they lose respect for you really quickly.
Right.
But if you are in a stable relationship or marriage, they appreciate when you make the first move. And if a woman feels appreciated in everything that she does, she will more likely get comfortable making that first move.
But I can't argue that women do make the first move sometimes, just that the men don't recognize it as an actual move.
Because sometimes we're more subtle.
Yes.
They're just more brash, and our moves are subtle because we have been taught, you know, to be that way.
Right.
To be proper and to be refined and not say certain things certain way.
Exactly.
Certain ways, so the men just might not pick up the cues. But
So
we're doing a women thing there, Yuri.
we have comments here saying women would like to be appreciated, they would like to be appreciated, tenderness, affection, to be touched all over, admiration, stimulated all over, affection, again. One man says, my experience is that a woman loves to feel appreciated all around, and then it will be easier for her to be romanced.
There's also the what we call it. People are generally misguided to think that younger women are more sexually hyped. And as they get older, their sexual desires wane. And in general, probably that's true, but it has been found that women in their 30s and 40s actually get more orgasms and enjoy more orgasms than women in their 20s. Although
that's when they really get to know themselves and
Sister
learn more about
Lorianne,
themselves. Yes,
can I read a few of the comments coming from you too as well?
Sure.
Definitely. Join in, Kathy.
Okay, and one of these comments were helping in the home, spending quality time, showing affection, all to help build sexual desire in women.
Very true, very true.
Yes, please. Dr. Dupuy, we are not seeing you virtually.
Do you want me to say something else?
So, well, yeah, I think that is it. So we're going to take a break while our viewers or participants or guests can send in their questions. We've had a very nice discussion, and I'm sure you all have some questions. We already have some questions here. So, what's that? Okay, so let's just questions and answers. Type them in, guys.
See some there. I see some there already. I see.
Yes, Dr. Dupuy, we have a lot of questions coming in. We have a lot of questions coming in. But before we get to the questions, I want to answer one that was in the chat, and that one was asking for the information from Dr. Dallaston, and you can reach him at Daily Digest on Facebook or on Instagram. DillisonCharles@gmail.com or www.dillisonCharles.com. And we are at our question section. And this first one says, I ain't had sex for 2 years. Now my wife says she ain't feel like it anymore. What shall I do? Okay.
I'm not sure, but I mean, as far as I know, after a year of no sex, the court can consider the marriage over. It's easy to sue for divorce and you will get a divorce because technically there is no marriage. But, I'm not going to give that kind of advice. I think that question may be good for Sorry? Oh, yeah, I was thinking that it probably, the sex therapist can probably answer that next week if the person is here, because that would have to be like lighting a fire that's gone out.
Yeah,
Yes, yes,
definitely. Dellison can probably give his 2 cents at this point.
All right, guys, I want to jump in here. All right, so I looked at the question. The person said, I haven't had sex for 2 years. Now my wife says she's not feeling like it anymore. What shall I do? And I'm saying that this is 2 years too long. My simple answer is this is 2 years too long. When we have issues with intimacy that are going beyond, I would even say going beyond a month, and I sometimes I discuss with clients going beyond 6 months, because I know that there are some times that we can have some emotional obstacles. Let's say if there was an issue with infidelity or there was an issue with financial mismanagement and some of the other things that do affect your marriages. There are some times when there is a lingering, due to this interruption in the home, and so because of emotional unsettling and there are not certain conversations that have been had, it is a reality that some couples can go up to 6 months without sexual activity, but here we're talking about 2 years, and so it is something that is deeper. This speaks to a condition that is deeper. If depending on what the age bracket is, it can speak to something that is physiological, and so I can recommend the persons to be checked out just to ensure that estrogen levels and testosterone levels are where they're supposed to be. Also to determine if there is early onset, menopause, dependent on the age group. Again, I don't know, so I'm just speaking in faith and from professional experience. But if indeed everything is okay on the physical side, on the health side, then it may be speaking to something that is deeper on the emotional side. And so I would recommend persons to have some psychological intervention there as a couple if they are open to it. These sessions are done best with mutual consent. So if it's something that you are interested in talking about, Stanley, and your wife is not interested in having the conversation, then there is something that's deeper at play in the relationship. If, however, she is open to it because there might be an obstacle or a blockage that is deeper than just the physical, then some psychotherapy sessions or some talk therapy can really do well to interrupt this pattern, because this is 2 years too long. 2 cents. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks,
Okay.
Dellison.
Okay, the next question is, if a man lost his wife 2 years ago, can this affect his sexual life in a new marriage due to the depression of the loss of a woman with whom he has 20 years in a relationship, 10 years in a marriage? He has one child with her, a son of 2 years. She died after the birth. He suffered together with her battle against cancer.
That's a lot to swallow right there.
I don't know. But I
Okay.
would agree with Dellison that she needs a lot of
Yeah,
therapy.
I think this second question regarding the man who has lost his wife and so on and having lost the woman, there's a key word in this contribution. The key word here is due to the depression. And as I would have shared with the platform tonight, that anxiety and depression are two of the biggest mental illnesses that do affect men. And we have the statistics to support it. And so if that man has had these two experiences, which are traumas in themselves, and trauma is another word that people casually use, but trauma is very deep because it affects your interpretation, it affects your filters, and it affects the way that you relate to the environment around you. And indeed, things like divorce and death and accidents and so on, these are all traumatic events. And so when we're talking about cancer, which is a very serious illness, traumatic in itself, and we have death, very serious life event, which is traumatic in itself. If we have these two things operating at play, and this gentleman has not had intervention or has not sought support just to ensure that his psycho-emotional functionality is good and it's safe, what can happen is that if he continues to suppress it, he can enter into a relationship or attempt to enter into a relationship with somebody. And that's actually going to be a more frustrating situation because while the person can observe what is happening from his blind spot, because of that same blind spot, he's not necessarily able to perceive the reasons why his ability to relate and communicate emotionally might be interrupted. And so, yes, it is possible to go into a relationship with such a man, but I would say to create a safe space or contribute to creating a safe space so that you can broach these conversations just to ensure that in his present state, he's not being affected by things that he's not addressing, which would contribute or directly negatively impact the amount of happiness that you can enjoy as a couple.
Mhm.
So, Delison, at this point, is the person is asking, is it possible though to get into a relationship with such a person, or is it that they have to a certain extent, heal from that situation that they're coming from? Because if his spouse has died from cancer, he's coming out of this whole situation where he's either coming out of or still in a state of depression. He's now a single parent of a toddler. Is it possible to be to go into a relationship with such a person, or is it probably recommended that that person get the help they need before you take that next step?
I would recommend getting the help, and this is something I'd like to share too when it comes to therapy. Therapy has a very big taboo attached to it because our filter in society has been that if you're going for therapy, you have an issue or you have issues. And I remember recently speaking to one of my clients, and in the first session, we spent about 35 minutes just me convincing him that my job here is not to tell him that he has issues. Because he said, I know why they send me here because I have issues. And so I wanted to tell him that my job in simple is just to observe his patterns in a very organic, natural sense and see what might be working for him or not working for him. And so when he got that assurance, he was able to open up and be able to discuss some things that were affecting his marriage on a deeper level. And so I would say that yes, I do recommend therapy because therapy is basically an open, safe conversation that you can have with a professional in the field who is able to listen to you without judgment nor condemnation, who is able to create a safe space where you can feel vulnerable enough to share those details about the things that you have not spoken to anybody else, and who is able, and that's where therapy comes in, who is able now to share the tools and the techniques with you that you can practically apply to improve your relationships and to improve yourself as an individual. And so, yes to therapy. I tell people therapy is not taboo. Therapy is not to say that to say that you have issues, but what therapy exists is to identify the issues or the obstacles that you're having, take those out of the way or help you take those out of the way, and then empower you with the information or the tools and the support that you need to turn around the experiences that you have. So I do recommend the therapy.
Okay, the next question is, I am a male over 50. Does my diet affect my testosterone production?
Yes, and yes. Yes, and yes. As we spoke about the libido issue, I spoke about the anxiety, the stress, and the depression. are some of the main factors that can contribute to low sexual desire, right, or low sex drive. But poor health, poor diet as well, and lack of exercise also contributes to lower testosterone levels and lower sex drives and desire for sexual activity. And so age is not necessarily the factor here, but if you have a diet that is not balanced and that is contributing to induced fatigue and high levels of sleepiness and so on, and it's really causing you to experience some lethargy, that will have a direct impact on your desire to engage in otherwise activity. Because if your diet is overcharged, then what you do is that you feel yourself experiencing ethnic fatigue and you want to just relax, and all of your energy is concentrated on digesting what you have overconsumed, right, or poorly consumed. And so if all of your energies is going into that, if you have a partner who's coming to want to engage in sexual activity, chances are you won't have the energy to do that. So I would say balance, just as I tell people, balance your diet, also balance your exercise, because too much exercise is also a problem. Too much exercise does reduce your testosterone level. So you balance your exercise, you balance your diet, and you should see, your testosterone production balanced out. No pun intended.
Hey, when are you coming back, Dellison?
When am I coming back? When you guys invite me back, I'd like to see that.
Okay. Next
Thank
month
you
we're
guys.
doing trauma, so
Yeah.
we would love to have you while we're talking about trauma.
All right.
The next question, which follows the one that was just asked, is so a woman that has a high sex drive has high testosterone? I think Dr. Dupuy answered that earlier, but she can speak on this again.
It's very possible. We don't have static levels of hormones, or hormone levels change with age and day and diet and other functioning of other organs. So yes, a woman's sex drive may be because of her testosterone level, but it may not necessarily be so. Doesn't necessarily mean that those women who have super testosterone have a higher desire for sex, at least sex with men. It's possible they may want to have sex with women.
All right. And our next question, I am a 30-year-old male. I am 300 pounds. Sometimes I can't maintain an erection even to masturbate. What can I do to keep it up? I think Dr. Dupuy spoke about these things and very earlier in our discussions on Healing Moments, when we spoke about diet and exercise and keeping active and getting sunlight.
Estrogen tends to be stored in adipose tissue as well. So if the man has a lot of fat, it is possible he's storing more estrogen than he really should. So that may affect his sex drive and may affect his ability to maintain an erection. And that may just be one of the factors. But of course, remember that sex and sexual behavior and sexual function are multifactorial, as Dellison was saying earlier. So there's so many things that need to be checked out. So we have talked about weight. What is this? Sorry. We had talked about weight control earlier. I think on the first program when we talked about nutrition, we had talked about weight control and exercise. So this is something that can be treated by this person controlling their weight and changing their diets.
And that's me. Okay, we have a question coming in from YouTube, and it's coming all the way from Suriname. And it says, I joined late, but what about rape and sexual abuse victims who have a strange sexual behavior, some sort of addiction to it? Right. She goes on to say it's called genital arousal disorder, I think.
Is Sherry here? I think Sherry and Dallison may be able to speak to that effect of rape on sexual behavior, sexual function?
I All right, I will speak to it. I will speak to it from. I'm not a rape counselor per se, but of course we are trained to deal with all of these issues, especially as the bottom line issue in it is trauma. And trauma therapy is very important. I mean, trauma therapy is very important because trauma is very important. I know when some people think about traumas, they think about death, accidents, as I mentioned before, divorce, and so on. But rape is actually one, because we have a rape culture in the Caribbean. It's not very widely spoken of, but within the whole framework of toxic masculinity and all of the societal permissions that men get. Um, and I'm speaking as a man, I want to say that all of the permissions that men get when it comes to hypersexuality and how we can show up in society, women do exist within a rape culture, and it's a real fear. And so, for a woman who has been raped, especially if that rape comes from somebody who she would have trusted or somebody who was supposed to have represented a safe space for her, that is a very deep trauma. And I have seen firsthand where we've had females who, I know some persons who have been raped while they were virgins. And so it's doubly traumatic because one, you have never had a sexual experience before. And then the second level to that is that you have been violated and just left. Like, there's no connection after the event. It's just use and discard, or, use and abuse. And so what it has done, or what it would have done for them, is that it would have really, really impacted negatively on their self-esteem, their self-image, and their sense of self-worth. And if that is unaddressed and that continues, you know, along their development, you can have them easily being triggered or re-victimized by callous conversation, persons talking loosely about rape. They could get in a conversation with somebody who says something like, "Yeah, that woman, she looked for it," and any of those callous comments that people could say. And what that does is that it re-victimizes the person who would have endured the trauma themselves. But if that person has never really dealt with it, nor entered into conversation, talk therapy for it, then they can be experiencing some really, really deep traumas and triggers within that they are just fighting to suppress and stay normal. So I would say, yes, please address it. Find the safe space. Things like rape and things like incest and all of these other forms of sexual trauma that we have, these are very difficult to discuss with persons with whom you don't feel safe. And so, even as a counselor, I say to people, find a counselor that you trust, find somebody that you are willing to open up to, who can give you the compassion and the commitment to your case that is necessary.
Thanks, Delison, for that. The next question is, my husband and I have been married for 2 years, and he still wants sex every other night. What's wrong with him? Does he have a demon? He gets vexed when I say no. Who's going to answer this question?
I'm trying to figure out why she says no and why she thinks he has a demon.
He has a
I thought
Correct.
she was going to say, I thought she was going to say that he doesn't
At 2
want
years,
it.
they're still in that honeymoon phase, but I guess not.
Anyway, I
Dr.
think
Luku, you want me to
couples need
take
to
it?
come to an agreement, but I do not see why sex can't be a nightcap, just like your nightly prayer. It all depends. I mean, you don't have to spend a lot of time on it every night, just like you don't spend a lot of time on prayer or a lot of time on breakfast. It can be short, it can be sweet, it can be long, it can vary, but I don't think I don't think there is a disorder if you have sex every night, except when you have your period. It's a thing, as long as you both agree. So there's no demon there.
I would agree that it's not necessarily a case of having a demon, but I want to tie it back to what I would have shared before regarding there not being any set acceptable libido. I remember one thing that my best man shared with me in his speech on our wedding day 2 years ago. He said, it's not about learning every woman, it's about learning your woman. And so he really caused us to focus on that usness that we have created in our relationship, and we have taken from that, and we, me, my wife and I, we have just developed this thing where we are having open conversation about everything, including sexual activity. And so I would say that this one requires conversation, it requires deeper communication, because it's not that he has a problem. I mean, having sex every day, that's not necessarily a manifestation of hypersexuality. And for some people, that's regular sexuality, regular sexual activity. But again, there's no acceptable, there's no too high or too low libido, because everybody might be different. But if there's a mismatch in sexual desire that is causing an element of dysfunctionality in the relationship, then it warrants communication. As a single person, I mean, you could deal with your lack thereof. But as a married couple, there should be an alignment, or there should be some compatibility in libido levels, or in willingness to engage, even when you may not feel to. And if it is a real obstacle that is preventing your ability to engage, then it does require an intervention. It does require some professional communication.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Now, we have one coming from another person in the chat, and it goes, women are lovers and men are getters. Does that sound like a true statement in view of what you are saying about arousal patterns of men and women?
Dr. Dupree, Ken? Oh, sorry, on
Repeat
mute.
that. It says again,
I'm
women are
reading that.
lovers and men are getters. Go ahead, Dr.
I-
Dupree.
Yes, I was about to say that so many of those questions sound like they could be kept for next week. We could probably compile them and let the sex therapist answer them next week. Yes, Sherry? What do you think? I don't know if I can answer that medically, and I'm not a sex expert, even though I have been called that since last week.
Okay, we'll try to remember that one for next week. But we have another one, and it says, men are generators. They don't want sex. They need it. Is this a true statement?
Generators, everybody needs sex. It's a need like food and water and shelter. It's just on a different level than those. It's probably not on the lowest level from Maslow's hierarchy, but I think everybody needs sex. That's why people grow up, reach puberty. Puberty has everything to do with sex. It's part of life. If you don't go through puberty, then something is wrong. Puberty prepares you for a sex life. So sex is part of our physiology, a part of our makeup, just like how we have legs for walking. We have sexual organs and sexual hormones for having sex. And all of us may not be able to participate in sex based on other things that are going on in our lives, whether they be physical, physiological, spiritual, mental, but sex is a regular part of life.
I read that. Take me read that.
If I could respond as a man here,
Sure,
with some
go
measure
right
of
ahead.
Sure, you have
experience,
to respond as a man.
right, with some measure of experience, sex is normal, all right? Sex is normal, and sex is a regular activity that we should desire. I take my focus back to Genesis 1, just after the Lord would have created, Adam and Eve, when he said, man and woman, and he said, let's make man in our image and likeness, male and female created he them. And then he said, go forth and multiply, replenish the earth. So we see that built into the fabric of male and female, man and woman, is a drive for sex, right? God he made us with this drive, and he gave us a command to go forth and do it. And so there is a natural need, a natural desire, once the right conditions exist, for men and women to want sex and to want to engage in it. Now, I think that there has been a lot of normalizing when it comes to hypersexuality in our society, Caribbean society. We don't even understand that we've been bombarded so much by hypersexuality, not just in being hypersexual, but also in the media, in the music, in the ads, in the advertising, the marketing strategies. Sex sells. And so we have been conditioned to believe that what we really are looking for is sex, and what we need is sex. But I would say, especially working with men and being a man myself, it's not that we always need sex, but men, we always need an outlet. And that's the difference. There's a difference between needing sex and needing an outlet. And for some of us, sex is an outlet. But for some other men, they can exercise and find that same outlet. They can pray, maybe, and find that same outlet. Some men can sleep and the stressful feeling will pass away. So all men are not the same, and this statement, men are gene narrators. I understand because we produce the seed and we have the genes in them, but the last time I checked, we need X and Y chromosomes, and 23 comes from the male, 23 comes from the female, and that makes you a full-fledged human being, right? So it's not to say that men, we have some superiority when it comes to sex, and we have some supremacy, and when we need it or when we call for it, we must get it. That's not the case. It is a regular normal outlet for men to have. But as Dr. Dupuis said as well, women also have the need for sex, right? So I guess sometimes you have to determine in this situation, is it that you are needing sex per se, or is it that you are needing a deeper level of intimacy, which could require just cuddling and communication and releasing some pent-up emotions. It's not necessarily sex all the time.
Thank you very much, Delson. You are really instrumental tonight with us, and I'm sure Dr. Dupuis and Sister Sherry appreciate. And it, yes, instrumental tonight. Okay, so we have this very important question here. Women hate feeling like a vagina. Is this a true statement? And what does that mean? Explain to the men, please. Who's going to explain to us?
I was the one who made the statement that women hate feeling like a vagina. It's I don't know if it's an original statement. It came straight from my head. And I'm speaking, as Delison speaks like a man, I'm speaking like a woman. I hate to think that I am viewed as a vagina or a sex outlet. And I think that it goes for women. And people like to be appreciated for who they are, not just for what they bring or for what they can give. And so if every time you approach a woman, you do it sexually, she will believe that is all you see in her. And I don't think a woman likes to feel like that. I know that a woman likes to feel like more than that, and she wants to feel loved and appreciated outside of the sexual arena.
Me.
So there are other women there, and I guess they can.
Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Healing Moments. Now, next week, we will continue our talk on sexual health. But remember, next week is the last Thursday in the month. So whatever questions we didn't get a chance to answer this week, We will be sure to answer them next week if the sex therapist is on. So once again, I want to thank those of you on Zoom and on YouTube, and my co-host who was with me this afternoon, Sister Lorianne. Thank you so much. And our
Most
guest
welcome.
presenter, Mr. Delson Charles, for being with us this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming to Healing Moments. And we look forward to seeing you next week when we end this edition of Healing Moments and Sexual Health. Until next Thursday at 6 p.m., join us. Tell a friend about Healing Moments. Tell them Healing Moments is on. So until next Thursday, thank you, and I'll see you.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care.